Hello, welcome. Welcome, folks. Sound off in the chat. Where are you all checking in from? Oh, I sent that only to the hosts and panelists. We're just going to be letting people log in a bit here. I can see the chat's already filling up. We got some people here. And what we'll do is we'll get started in about 2 minutes. We'll let everybody get in here. We don't got, I think we need to get like a theme song going. So people come in, it's loud, it's energized. We're starting a little. Oh, we got Budapest. That's a great, great city. Quite far away from where a few of us are here today. Good evening, I should say. Not good morning. Um, Carol, you're checking in from Denver, right, today?
Denver, yes, it's been a nice week here in the 60s.
Isn't it always like one of the sunniest places in the world, I think? Like you get more
Yeah,
sun than
about 300
California.
days of sun a year. Yeah, get
Oh
a
my
lot of
God.
sun.
I'm gonna start applying to move down anytime. Vancouver, I think we have the
Yeah,
opposite. 300 days
Vancouver,
of rain.
not as much sun. Yeah,
Yeah, 300 days of rain over
little
here.
different.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Okay, we've got some folks still filtering in. As they filter in, you can always catch the beginning whenever you want. And with that, we'll get started here today. So, welcome everybody to our latest webinar in 2025. Today's topic we'll be discussing from selection to success, a hotelier's blueprint for tech transformation and team buy-in. And my name is Trevor McLean, and I am the Director of Partnerships and Growth here for Event Temple. And I am so happy to be joined by Carol Helsel, CEO and founder of Dragonfly Strategists. Um, and I'm just going to start off and just dive in. Carol, let's start with you if we don't mind. Tell us about Dragonfly Strategists. Who are you and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Trevor, for having me on this morning or this afternoon or evening, wherever you might be. Dragonfly Strategists, I founded it in 2016, and my background was primarily in more of the small to medium-sized hotel company or independent boutique collections. I saw a need for those groups who couldn't necessarily afford to have a really strong home office team or corporate office, some people call it, um, to be that for hotel companies. So we're a commercial IT and operations advisory firm. So we're full circle. When we initially started, we did primarily revenue distribution and IT, and then have expanded the services over the course of several years. So we guide, and speaking specifically to our technology advisory, we guide a lot of hotels in search, selection, migration, install, tech stack design, guest and employee and club member journey mapping to map it back to what technology can deliver the experience that the vision of the owner has. So yeah, that's what we do, and we're purely hospitality, and work in this arena and breathe it day in and day out.
Yeah, and I'm so curious, Carol, like what led you to leave working in hotels and found a business? That can be a scary endeavor for a lot of people. Like what were you seeing at the time and what did you set out to do with Dragonfly?
Well, dragonflies, stand for transformation. That's what dragonflies are in the world, and in their
I love
spiritual
that.
symbolism is transformation. And so, when I started the company, it was really about, transforming strategy to revenue is our tagline, and that truly is what we do because, we believe you have to have a solid strategy, but it needs to end up in revenue, right, for the owners. And so it really is that transformation process. And I've been able to recruit some of the most talented people, in my opinion, in their disciplines in the industry. And so we have a lot of fun at the company, but we believe in giving back, but we also are very committed to the excellence that we deliver. And it really is about us coming alongside clients, collaborating with them, and enabling them to be more successful than they could be on their own.
Absolutely. And I agree. Your team is fantastic. I've had the joy of getting to work with a
Thank you.
few of them so far, and nothing but thumbs up from the Eventable team, I'll tell you that. And I know we're not necessarily who
Thank
you're
you.
serving. We're ones who are working with you occasionally. Um, so you've seen a lot of hotels like through software transformation since 2016. And we're probably seeing some of the most even today, right? Like we're starting to really see rapid changes. I'm sure anyone who's a tech vendor in here could attest to that. Probably any hotelier is kind of thinking about this. What do you think a hotel needs to be considering that's often overlooked when they're deciding to do a tech stack change? Because I'm sure there's some folks here thinking about it and they don't want to miss out on anything important.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I know we're going to get to the change management question in a bit, so I won't focus too much on that, but that's a big
You
one that
can leave
people
me
miss,
to
and that
it.
causes that causes adoption issues, obviously. But I think in taking a step back, first of all, I believe you have to know what is the guest experience, the employee experience, and if you have a private members club, the club experience you want to deliver, right? And then if you're a group house, what do you want to deliver? What's the experience you want to deliver to that event manager or that meeting planner? And so, being sure to know what the experience is you want to deliver. I will use an example. We have a hotel that we've worked with for a few years, and as they were opening, we weren't engaged with them for the tech stack piece, and they ended up installing a PMS but their whole vision for the experience was that they could do kiosks and mobile, and the PMS didn't support it. So they ripped it out and had to put a new one in 30 days before opening because that was
Oh
the
my God.
experience they wanted to have at the hotel. And so it's really understanding, what is that experience I want to deliver, and then mapping that to the technology companies that can deliver that experience. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think secondly, be sure that there's due diligence done. If there are things that are critically important to you or critically important to your team, critically important to your ownership, be sure that you ask the question and get the answer as to whether that company can do it or not, right? Furthermore, if it's on their roadmap, will they commit to delivering it by a certain date, right? In an agreement. And so, I think that really understanding that vision of the experience you want to deliver, being sure that you do the due diligence and know what is most important to you. And then finally, I think one thing that sometimes is overlooked is that cultural fit. I think that, if you're a very traditional company that has a traditional approach to everything, to go with something that's more bleeding edge is going to shock the system, right? And so determining what is the culture of the company? Can we work well together with them? Are we going to feel supported? Are we going to have attention as a company, right? So those are three of the top things. Really, what's the experience you want to deliver? Complete your due diligence, and be sure there's a good fit. Even personality-wise, cultural-wise with the company.
I love that. And that's something, that I don't, your last point especially, I think is one that's heavily overlooked, which is not every hotel wants to or is ready to be bleeding edge with it, right? And
Yeah,
if you go to the
yeah.
bleeding edge, that can be pretty scary and different. And that actually, I think that could be a massive shock. I never even thought of that, even as a vendor, but absolutely when I see
Well,
people who've done well and
and the
not.
reverse
Yeah.
is true, right? The reverse is true as well. If you're a really edgy
Yeah.
company, you need to make sure that your tech is forward as well. And so I think that you do have to think about that in your consideration set.
Yeah. Well, then to go further, right? Because there's single hotels and what they need to consider, and multiple hotels, what they need to consider. What do you think is the difference for if you're running one hotel versus if you're running multiple hotels when you're talking about changing or selecting software?
Well, obviously, there's the functionality piece of is there enterprise functionality in the system, right? Because if you're a single hotel versus multi hotels, there's a different view. And so you have to consider what are the enterprise capabilities, what are the efficiencies that the system has, what are the ability to, for example, even on the back end, to load a rate and copy it everywhere. I mean, those types of things are different when you're dealing with multi-prop versus an individual hotel. You know, I would say as well, it kind of depends on what the portfolio is too, right? If you're very transient business driven hotels versus big resorts, there's a difference in what you need. The big resorts need a lot more technology to support everything that they're doing, right? Versus a hotel that, you know, is 100 rooms in, you know, Midtown Manhattan, looks different. And so I think that really being able to identify again, what are the individual property needs versus talking about the group of hotels and what is needed to deliver from that standpoint. So it's a bit of a different exercise, but many of the functionality questions are the same. I mean, there are certain base level things that 80% of hotels and resorts are going to need, right? And then there's 20% that's usually custom to what the company is.
Yeah, I'm curious from this one, and I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but I'm curious for you, like you're probably seeing now, you know, with a lot more vendors probably than ever before, right? So these functionalities are not necessarily being done by one company as much as they used to. Do you think it's getting harder or easier for like these big resorts or like larger groups to be making these changes, considering there's potentially now like call it 10 software solutions in a hotel, probably more, depending on your need. What are your thoughts there?
I mean, often more, depending on how
Yeah.
big you are, right? You know, it's complicated, and I think there is some effort, and there's this debate. There's always this debate going on in tech, right? Do we go best in class? Do we go try to find a single source solution? You know, how is that approach? And that's a debate. I mean, I was with a couple of people on a panel last year where they were CIOs who were saying, please give me, you know, one solution, you know, one neck to choke if something goes wrong, like that kind of thing, right? However, there are still people out there who strongly believe in sourcing the best solutions that are integrated. And so, you know, I think that it's definitely, to me, it's more complicated for many reasons. Especially on the distribution side of things. We have so many channels we have to connect to, right? And in getting those channels optimized after a migration it's hard, and it's a lot of effort, and it can really hurt your revenue if you don't have it dialed in, right? And so I think it's critical that you have people on your team who know how to do it, or that you engage a company like ours or anyone else's. There are lots of good companies out there that can help guide these implementations and migrations. And I think that far too many times in the hospitality business, people look at it as, oh, this is easy. And it's not. It's complicated.
No.
And there's a lot of revenue at risk if it's not done right the first time.
Well, I think you're like, this is like that perfect transition, and we kind of alluded to it in our like first question, which is change management, right? Because it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like that is one of the areas in which you can, I want to say reduce complexity, but maybe let's call it that's your insurance, right? But it's
Yeah,
often
yeah, yeah.
overlooked. I can tell you I've seen it overlooked from a vendor side for sure. Like, hey, someone jumps in, they're not ready, maybe necessarily. Why do you think it is that change management is often overlooked? And how can a hotelier solve that challenge?
Well, I mean, change is hard, right? And so, yeah, you've got to be committed to the hard work of change. And I think it's overlooked. I mean, hoteliers are hospitality people, right? And they're
Yeah.
welcoming everyone in, and they're, you know, making everyone feel as though they're to be there and they belong, and all those hospitality things that are in our bones as hospitalitarians, right? However, that doesn't always mean we're great at project management or we're great at change management as a hotel company. especially smaller groups of hotels that maybe have a lot of people wearing multiple hats. And so here they are trying to run a hotel company while trying to do a big tech stack change. And it's difficult and it requires a lot of commitment. I think, the best cases that I've seen with implementations are when you don't just have one person or two people engaged in running it. You have, constituent stakeholders from every department that are involved, that are responsible to be the cheerleaders to take it back to their departments and get them on board, right? You have to have part of change management is a strong communication plan. You have to be sure people are informed, they know what's coming, they know when their training is happening, they know what's happening, that 48 hours of migration time, and that they know who's going to give them post-go live support and all of those pieces, right? And you really need to, when you're buying new technology, you don't just want to replicate what's in your existing technology. Otherwise, why not keep it? And so it's also that mindset of kind of re-engineering how you do business, and you re-engineer it with a system to support your re-engineered business. But then you've got to be sure that the change management throughout the organization is in line with what you're doing. And, we often recommend champions, if you're doing an enterprise level implementation of a technology, make sure that there's a champion at every property. And I know
Absolutely.
that might be hard for a really huge, big brand to do, and they approach it a little bit differently. They have a lot more people to do these kinds of things. But when you're dealing with small to medium-sized hotel companies with independent boutique hotels or small groups of hotels, every hotel can have a champion, and that will then, again, their role is to get everyone on board with this change. And finally, I would say, tell them the why. It's important for people to understand the why you're doing this. If you just say, oh, we're putting in new technology because our old technology is 30 years old. Telling them the why is super important. Yeah.
Just changing it because it's old doesn't necessarily mean you should, right? But it's probably got its reasons. I guess, that was like, that almost like led me to one, but you sort of answered it as well as like, I'm sure in any scenario like this, you've got people who are super excited, but then you've got that group who might not be. And hey, if you're one of those people who's not that excited on this webinar today, I'm not judging. That's totally okay. But like
No.
sometimes these changes, they're going to happen. And what advice would you give for folks who maybe are dealing with that? They're maybe dealing with some team schisms and challenges as a result of making these. Like how can they help guide people to the flock and bring their team on board if there's people not really excited about it?
I mean, one of the ways to bring them on board is to listen. Ask them questions and say, why is this intimidating? Are you fearful of change? Are you worried that you're not going to be able to deliver your guest experience because you have to learn something new? What is driving the fear? I know in many of the places where we've implemented and migrated, the fear is because they've gone through it before and it was really bad. And so they're like, this was a horrible migration that I went through, and I never want to do it again. And now I'm having to do a migration at my new hotel, and I don't want to deal with it. It was terrible, right? And so, there are a number of reasons why people are hesitant to do it. And part of it, now we're stretched for resources at all of our hotels. We've not gotten back to the staffing levels that we were, pre-pandemic. And I think that people also look at it as, oh my gosh, it's another thing on my plate. And so I think being able to sell, again, the vision of what you're trying to achieve and talk to where you're trying to get to. And with new technology should come new efficiency to free you up to deliver even better guest service. So I think, just really being able to focus on what's the value prop, what's in it for me. give somebody what's in it for them, and then they tend to start moving to get on board. But I think listening, and not, as you said, shaming or disregarding somebody's perspective. I think it's important, to have those conversations and have open lines of communication through the process.
That makes so much sense. And then I'm gonna even take the other side here for like, is there anything in this scenario that you would say like a vendor could do to better ensure this change management is handled? Because I'm sure there's this side that's like it's both ways, right? Like obviously,
Mhm.
if we're saying, hey, you should change as a vendor, we should probably be helping along. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think, for a lot of technologies, let's say they have great online training, for example, but it's really purely training on the functionality. I haven't seen a lot of um, education around change management from tech partners. And I think having that conversation at the outset of a relationship is important, and understanding what they're trying to achieve. What's your end game? What do you want the outcome to look like? Is really important. And so what I would say is start that conversation up front. And not only do you talk to what your technology can do, but talk to what your services can do. Talk to how your implementation team will partner with them to help manage the change. Talk about having key stakeholders at the table and who is going to be part of this, and then encourage them to be inclusive in that group that's part of it, and not just IT, or not just the sales leader, right? Really,
Mhm.
and encourage that inclusivity. So I think that tech partners can bring best practices to the table to share. And I don't see a lot of that. I see a lot of, project management, like we're getting this task, that task, this task, but not necessarily the change management, which is the mindset, the adoption, the why behind the what, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting,
SOPs. I mean, they need to change, like processes have to change when you implement new technology. So, that even being able to talk about that. I mean, we were just talking to someone who's changing PMSs, and we're trying to put together, this is the terminology in your current system, this is the terminology in your new one, and doing this equals this, right? And so just being able to do that, because sometimes tech companies call things different names or have different acronyms, but in the end it's kind of the same thing, right? So yeah, it's
for sure.
important.
For all you trace folks, we're sorry that Event Temple calls them tasks. um, where was I? The question that I had actually after that, well, actually more of a statement. What you said with like ensuring that buy-in. You reminded me actually of even some folks who've been very successful with us, and I've noticed some sort of trends. There's even sometimes bringing their teams into the buying cycle, right? I remember there's times where
Hmm.
like I think it was around 2019 I ran this one, and it started with meeting just the key decision makers, right? Like we met and they're like, this is where we're at, this is what we're trying to do. But there wasn't a final decision until we brought in the group of DOSs who were running these properties, and they had to go like, hey, we can be on board with this or not. And I think it was very valuable because I think it helped with a lot of that change management, because suddenly people kind of got to say like, hey, like, and I'm sure not everybody voted yes, but there was at least enough of a majority vote they went ahead. And I think that probably
Yeah.
helps ensure like, hey, we're feeling confident about this as a group.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. If you do the work up front, the outcome is going to be a lot better.
Yeah.
But you need to take the time to do the work up front.
I'm gonna ask, probably this will be and I like to end on a more controversial note, at least for some of us, maybe not for all. And it's one we've talked about before, Carol. RFPs. Are they valuable and why?
Well, I'm of the camp that they are. And here's why. If you don't ask the question, you don't know the answer. And
Yeah.
so I think at a minimum, if you have must-have requirements, at a minimum, you need to ask. And you know, the RFP can serve as a legal document too, but hey, you said you could do this, you know, and now you can't. And so it's I think important to ask the right questions, to ask the things that are most important. And you know, when we look at it, we do dashboards, decision dashboards, right, for each product that we go to RFP with, and it really shows a client, you know, because you can weight questions according to what their must-haves are, and it shows them who lines up most, right? Who lines up the most with what our requirements are. It helps with the down selection process where you don't have to do deep dives with 6 companies. You can do deep dives with 3. And so it can save time. It can reveal things that you need to have discussions about. You know, some people don't like RFPs because you know, maybe they're complex, or if they, you know, even on the tech partner side, like, well, if I don't get the opportunity to talk to the client, the RFP is not going to tell the story. And
Yeah.
I think it can tell a story. And there is importance in that question. Like I started at the top with the story of someone who installed a PMS that didn't have kiosks and mobile capabilities. And that was
Yeah.
key to their guest experience. Again, if you don't ask the question, you don't know the answer, and then you assume that a system can do something because, oh, well, this system's been here for 10 years, surely it can do it, or this system is leading edge, and surely they can do it. And so I believe in due diligence. I think there are different levels of due diligence that you have to do. If it's a mission critical system, I would think you would want to take the time to do appropriate due diligence. So I think they're important, and you know, they're not the only decision maker though. Remember that whole cultural aspect that I talked about? You don't see that on an RFP, right? And so having those
Exactly.
interactions are important, right? But in the end, the technology has to be able to deliver your must-haves. And if someone's missing 70% of them, even if you have a good cultural fit, the tech isn't going to solve your problem. And so I think there's a good balance of both of that you know, due diligence on the functionality. And in some cases in the RFP, you ask certain legal due diligence, like certain company type information. But then as you get to that down select, really being able to meet face to face and have a deep dive meeting and see where that cultural fit is equally as important.
That absolutely makes sense. Kind of part of the toolkit, right? It's not the be all end all. It's going to be everything. It's just a part of a way that you can evaluate these solutions because they,
Yeah,
especially with more and more and more of them, you're going to need to make sure you knock off
yeah.
everything you do, right?
Yeah, you have 10 companies that might be able to give you a PMS, or 20, well, there are over 200 in the world or something like that. But I mean, let's say you narrow it down to 10, then you're going to have deep dives with all 10 of them and try to ask all the questions in person that you need to know. It really is also efficient and administrative responsibility to make the process easier in the long run.
Right on. Well, Carol, I'll end us off with my questions before we open it up, obviously, to the audience. Please, audience folks, if you have questions, Carol here is beyond a valuable resource. I'll take I'd love to hear your hot take. It's a topic that doesn't stop getting discussed, not even in hospitality, but everywhere. What's your take, AI? Is it becoming more and more important? Is it a bit just hype? Like today, what do you think?
Well, everyone talks about it, right? Not everyone's using it. And there are different types of AI, some of which, you know, machine learning type stuff we've been using for a really long time, but generative AI, not as much, right? And so I think there is opportunity in this area in a lot of different places. And I personally don't think it's to lay resources off. I think it's, we're still not back to the same staffing levels we were pre-COVID. So we have to find efficiencies. And I think there are things that AI can do really well. AI has gotten to the point, with the latest releases that some of the opportunity to use it even in a call center to answer informational calls and have the AI, search the database and come back with an answer seems a lot more human than it used to be from hospitality. There are companies out there, we have some of our clients are, utilizing it to do like menu pricing and demand assessments every day and adjust their food and beverage menus based on what the AI is evaluating each day on food costs and demand for different items. So there's opportunity for efficiency. There's opportunity to enhance the guest experience with it by removing some of the manual tasks from your team that they have to do today. And furthermore, there's opportunity with data analytics, forecasting, with predictive modeling for performance for new hotels and having like situations. I mean, there's a lot of areas that it can be used. I don't see, AI replacing humans at hotels. I just don't see that. If that ever happens, then we're no longer the hospitality business. And so I see it as something that can be complementary to help us deliver a better guest and employee experience.
I can't agree with you more. I think if you take the humans out of hospitality, what are we even doing at this point, right?
Yeah.
I think we're trying to make it so we can gather and meet more. That's something that Event Temple truly believes in, is that
Yeah.
as we've been a little more isolated in this world, I think we were all starting to see human interactions pretty great. It's nice to get a little bit more of it. I think that's what's naturally made us who we are and what we are. So I highly doubt that we're going to just start pulling away from it now.
Yeah. I think there
So we're
might be a
getting
couple
some
questions in
questions
the
in
chat,
here.
huh?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
first one I'm going to do is we've got this one in our Q&A, so we're going to answer this right now. The question is this: how often do you see properties trying to change more than one solution at a time? And what's the sweet spot in your opinion? What's too many? What makes sense to change at the same time? And any good learnings that you can share?
That's a good question, whoever asked that. So we've seen both. And of late, we've seen a lot of people doing an entirely new tech stack design and replacing everything. And so there's the thought that doing too much at once is too disruptive. And then there's the thought that doing it piecemeal is disruptive because then you might lose your integrations with your existing systems, right? So it really is, in my opinion, an individual case-by-case situation for a hotel, because you've got to be able to check people in and out. You've got to be able to have accounting. There are certain things you've got to be able to distribute your product to stay for sale, right? And so I think it really depends on what your existing stack is and how much updating it needs. Now, we've done as many as 5 or 6 migrations of different types of systems in one day for multiple resorts. So we have done it. It does, again, require a great deal of resource, a great deal of focus, and a lot of project management to stay on schedule, a lot of coordination with all of your integrated partners that have to connect, especially if you're replacing, when you're replacing your PMS. I mean, that's a big deal because there's so many integrations with it, right? And it's hard. You can't just put a PMS in and everything's just perfectly working without effort of coordinating with partners. And what's interesting is there are some now more 90% all in one. They don't have everything. Maybe they don't have a sales and event system, right? But they have everything else, right? And so in those situations, you are typically like going kind of all fell swoop, everything at once. And so I don't think there's necessarily a sweet spot, but what I do think is critically important is that your revenue system, so whether that's your sales and event system, that's your revenue management system, that's your central reservation system, how you distribute, your PMS and your ERP, your accounting system, these are critical systems, right? And you need to be sure that that either everyone is reintegrated quickly, and everything is ready to go on day of cutover, or that you're replacing all of that with stuff that does integrate. Like the last thing you want to do with a tech migration is go manual, and then your entire team is going to blow up and be like, this
Oh
was a
my
really
God.
bad decision. Right. And so, we have walked into situations where that's happened, and, the frustration and the pain that it puts on the operation is significant. And so, I wouldn't say there's a sweet spot necessarily, but, you have to make sure that, again, if you're just replacing one piece of it, does it integrate effectively with everything else? And is my team going to lose capability, or are they going to gain capability? And that's important.
Absolutely. And I think that also sounds like a key here. I'm sure there's some transfer time. You can't just hop off one, hop on another, right?
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah. And then the next question we had here, what systems should be used in different types of hotels and how should they be linked to achieve good guest experience?
Well, so it depends on your hotel. Like if you're a big
For
resort, you
sure.
have more technology because you have a lot more activities that you have to offer. You may have ticketing, you may have, you may have major 34 food and beverage outlets that require, half of them require reservations, or, there's a lot of different moving pieces, spa, golf, everything. And so in that situation, you obviously need to be able to deliver itineraries to guests because you want them using everything in your resort, right? And so that often is either something that integrates with the PMS. Some of the PMSs can do it, and some of them can't, right? And so they do it with partners. I think that integrations are not bad. They're critically important, and it depends on which way you're going. Are you going best in class, or are you trying to do a lot with one company? Because then that project plan that's going to look completely different. And so if it's an integration approach, you have to make sure that those are tested and that they're working. Because again, you don't want to go live and have, naturally the first 48 hours there's change, that your team is going to have on operationally at the hotel level. But you don't want them to, come in on Friday morning and everything's down and nothing's working and it's down for days. I checked into a hotel in Denver here before, as we were relocating, and their integration for their door locks had been down for 10 days
Oh
with the
no.
PMS implementation. And like, so therefore nothing would work to get you in the parking garage either. So they just were, you could tell they were exhausted, and they were like, oh my God, I can't believe we're still dealing with this 10 days later. So you don't want that situation, because then they're going to think, regardless of whether you've got the best technology in the world, they're going to think, oh, this was a terrible mistake. So a lot of it's perception, right? Perception's reality. But I just, it's obviously you've got to have a property management system. You got to be able to check people in and out. You need to be able to account for everything. You need to be able to distribute your products. You need to be able to, have a customer data platform, I believe. In some cases, CRM is still okay when you don't have a lot of ancillary, but with your resort and a company that has a lot of different places for someone to spend, retail and F&B and spa and golf and all that, you want a CDP because you want all that information about everyone who is using all of your different products and services. So again, it's somewhat dependent on what type of hotel you are and what your situation is. But there are platforms that are critically necessary. Sales and events is critically necessary, especially for if you have any group space whatsoever, right? You have to be able to manage it. You have to be able to keep track of your customers and your RFPs and all of those pieces, right? And not do it in a spreadsheet. So again, if you have no meeting space, you might be okay without, a formal and solid and strong sales and event system. But you get a couple small meeting rooms, you need it. So yeah.
I think we'll say it again for the people in the back. Say no to spreadsheets. They're not
No
a very
display.
good CRM. Let's just say it in that way.
They are not, and they walk off with
No,
people. So yeah,
no,
no
and
to spreadsheets.
I always feel for anyone who I've met who's using spreadsheets to manage their sales process. And for any of you, if you're doing that, Godspeed. I support you. I wish you the best.
I
We
know.
can get you out of there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
well, it looks like we've wrapped up some of these main questions. And with that, we can start wrapping it up. I guess I always like to just give it to you. Do you have a final word? Any final advice before we leave here today, Carol?
I would just say technology decisions are extremely critical to the success of your commercial and operations teams, right? And of your overall hotel performance. And so, be sure that you have conducted due diligence. Be sure that you have a good cultural fit. Be sure that you have project management and change management associated with it. And if you can't resource it yourself, be sure to partner with someone who can help you resource for it so that it doesn't kill your team. We've seen situations where whole teams have left after a big migration because it was so hard, right? And that's not what you want. So there are ways to alleviate
No,
that. And I see technology as that foundation that enables everyone to do and succeed and really produce the revenue that your owners expect. So as the foundation, you want to be sure that foundation is solid. So don't make the decisions lightly, and be sure that you're resourced to migrate them well.
absolutely agree. And I want to really emphasize that to anyone here attending. If you're considering a technology shift and you're not really sure and it's making you feel uncomfortable, Carol and her team, they're there to make it easy. They'll help you. They'll work with you, right? They'll ensure that we're connecting those experiences you want to deliver, mapping it out so that the company can do it, doing that due diligence and ensuring there's cultural fit. They can help take that effort off. Let's not have your team leave over a software change. That sounds terrible. And
Yes,
with that, I just
painful.
wanted to thank everybody for attending. Carol, thank you. Thank you so much. You were so gracious with all the information you gave here today. It was fantastic. And
Thank you, Trevor.
we wish you all a great day. Thank you all very much and have a
You,
wonderful one.
you as well. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.